This is episode 236 of the Super League Pod, where we forensically examine what it was that gave between the chokers and the bottlers as one had to win at Wembley. As well as your cup final views, we'll be reluctantly and conditionally discussing the Bradford Bulls again, get some international fixture updates, recap the British performances in the NRL, and remind ourselves, eventually, of the Super League top 5 playoff format. That and Emma's big takeaway from Alan's cup final trip. So get strapped in, it's SLP time. Hello everyone, welcome along to episode 236 of the Super League Pod. This is Mark, your regular host, and I'm joined by the regular Challenge Cup correspondent for the Super League Pod, which is Alan Cale. Alan, welcome back, how are you?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for not using, because you usually introduce me as the Bradford fan, and I'm a bit... I don't know if that's even applicable anymore in terms of the Trades Descriptions Act. But yes, Challenge Cup correspondent will do just fine.
Excellent. What we'll probably talk about your day down at Wembley when we get to the game later on in the show. Do you want to start by giving us details of who sponsors this episode of SLP?
Yep, so this episode is sponsored by Little Warden. If you have a website, then head to littlewarden.com and see what they can do to help you. They'll help you with domain, exploration checks, redirects, and all sorts of other important background web stuff they'll make simple for you. Vital alerts for hidden issues. Excellent stuff.
Thank you to Little Warden for their continued support. What we've got coming up on the show, we'll talk about the Bulls and the nonsense of that. We'll get to that. We'll get that out of the way shortly when we get to the news. There's a few other snippets of news as well that we'll go through, and then we'll get on to the main event of the Cup Finals recaps, because there was more than one Cup Final on Saturday. Lots of listeners' views on the action down at Wembley, which is fantastic. So they've come in from far and wide. So we'll get through all of those as well later on. Other than Wembley, other than the Challenge Cup and the 1895 Cup, what else has been going on, Alan? How are things? How's your summer?
Summer. I really had one, only because basically I started a new job at the beginning of August, and rather than being a combination of childcare and working, which August usually is, it's just been working. So getting used to a new workplace and all their different ways and all that kind of stuff has been going on. But so this bank holiday weekend has been a bit of a pleasant change to get away and do something a bit different. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking before we got started that I've been working quite a bit as well. Because I work in insurance and I work in complaints. We're dealing with the fact that a missold product, which is not related to the product that we sell or provide, has been, got a deadline on it. So I'm having to bat away a lot of people who claim to have PPI complaints against the company I work for. When it's not a product that we have ever provided or sold. So that's been a frustrating time for me. But some progress at the at SLP Towers. We've managed to rid the garden and the house of all the ivy that was strewn across it. Finally, we've done it in a few stages, but we've finally got it off the... there was a bit of our house that we couldn't get to. We had to go around to next door to get a fence panel taken out for us to get in to get the ivy out. So we did that yesterday, which was fantastic. I keeping up with my regular visits to the local tip and to the B&Q and all of those sorts of things.
Getting your B&Q loyalty card.
Yeah, on Saturday morning it was before the Challenge Cup final. I'd done a tip run and then we'd gone to B&Q, and as I was getting out of my car in the car park, there was a guy opposite me getting into his car, and he had like a relatively retro, a few years old North Queensland Cowboys top on, and I had my Tonga top on from the World Cup a couple of years ago. So we both sort of gave each other a knowing look, like we're in the Rugby League Hipsters Club, and then yeah, got on with that.
We're getting to B&Q nice and early before the cup game starts. Yeah.
Yeah, everything was all my many lists of jobs was done before the cup final, so I got to fully enjoy the build-up. So I'll be our correspondent from who watched it on TV angle, whereas you'll be the correspondent who was at the gate. I tell you what, I felt guilty all day about not being there. When I saw all the empty seats, when I heard the crowd announced, I felt like a right dick, because I'm like, you've got to be there at these events, haven't you, really? And what an event it turned out to be.
Indeed.
The field. But yeah, I felt guilty all day, and I made sure that Emma was thankful and appreciative of the fact that I'd foregone going to the Challenge Cup final to do stuff around the house with her. So because it did seem like she didn't quite realise that I'd actually sacrificed something there.
Well, I'm going to say, because is it really a sacrifice if your partner doesn't appreciate it? That's what I would say.
Well,
so
I tell you what she did appreciate, your photographs of brutalist architecture. She did appreciate that.
See, you could have said, look, you could, whilst I was at the rugby, you could have been looking at all these wonderful pieces of architecture, and look at this is what you could have been doing, and blah. You got to for next year, for July the 18th. Get it in your diaries, kids. That's where you got to keep selling it. You've got to say, look, there's a lovely spare room for us.
Yeah, well, exactly. Normally there would be, if she was coming, I'd have to stay over, and that'd become an expense and stuff. Whereas we've now got, we'll have Tim G's couch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how big is this couch? Because there's going to be a.
I don't know. He's going to have to find a way to accommodate all the co-hosts, isn't he?
I'm going to say hotels were really expensive this year. I mean, it's I don't know. I don't know if I can make it next year unless I get an offer of a couch. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. Definitely. We'll find out what the wider Wembley vegan scene is like next year. I think that's what we'll get up to. Right. Let's get at it. Let's talk about the actual rugby league topics. So we'll now move on to news from around the world of rugby league. I sense an Alan rant in the waters as we get into the first article on the slate for the news this week. The Rugby Football League has conditionally and reluctantly approved Bradford Bulls' application to ground share with Dewsbury in 2020. Championship club Bradford announced on 15th of August that it was planning to leave Odsal at the end of this season and had agreed a 2-year lease with Dewsbury. However, the RFL have only ratified the deal for the 2020 season. Friday's RFL statement said, "This permission has been granted reluctantly and is on the basis that the club's intention is to return to Bradford in the near future. On the evidence so far submitted, the club's plans for this return lack credibility. The RFL board feel that the information provided so far in relation to the move to Dewsbury is incomplete, and therefore it is a condition that the club provide further financial information on the impact of the move. Until this is provided to the satisfaction of the RFL, the club will remain in special measures and is not permitted to sign players. Based on the information received, the RFL feel that this decision made by Bradford Bulls directors is a poor one. However, ultimately the board of that club is responsible for determining what is in the best interests of Bradford Bulls. The actions taken by the club leave little alternative but to grant this request in order to avoid disruption to trading, but only on a time-limited basis, which will allow space for a more comprehensive review." And obviously as well, the RFL tagged onto that statement in the end that they would be reviewing what they do with the Odsal site now that basically the lease they have on it is wasted and is of no value to anyone, unfortunately, because Mr. Chalmers says he wants to go elsewhere. How do you feel as a Bradford fan, Alan?
Well, I don't know where to start, really. It feels a little bit a deja vu in more ways than one, in terms of unhappiness with the ground, which we had when we moved to Valley Parade for a couple of years, the continual arguments about the affordability of the ground. Apparently it's very expensive compared to others, although I have that's an individual's perspective on it. I have no idea what costs are at other grounds, and obviously a lot of teams are in different ownership situations with their grounds.
Other clubs get back from that deal that they spend. You don't, like, without knowing the full commercial arrangements, it's hard to comment on the cost of the ground, don't you? Because as I understand it, Bradford get to make quite a lot of money from like the corporate stuff at Odsal.
Yeah, because they do. Well, they did. I don't know. This is the thing. I don't even know this. They used the logic was that they owned the corporate side, the corporate building, but not the land underneath it, which is a bit of a weird situation. But yeah, that would suggest that they had the rights to own or to hold the money that was earned from hospitality. But
earn stuff from using the Coral stand or whatever stand it was called now. The building at the end,
yes,
on non-match days as well, without having to pay anyone anything for that use.
Yes, yeah, exactly, and yeah, I mean, this is the thing, though, isn't it? I think the ground, or the cost of the ground, it's just part of the picture, isn't it? It's part of the picture of a expensively put together squad that hasn't ultimately delivered, in terms of pushing us towards the playoff positions, because it looks like we're just going to miss out. We spent a lot of money on players who are fringe Super League, when we've had perfectly decent kind of backups that have been more of a Championship / League One kind of level, who, when they've come in and played, have actually done really good jobs. So yet again, it feels like it's a lack of ability to budget properly, because it's no point, or it's no good complaining about the cost of the ground, because you know what the cost of the ground is. That's a fixed cost. So if you play 12, 14, 16 home matches or whatever you play, you know what the cost of that is. You also know how much, when you're signing these contracts, how much these players' deals are as well. So it just cracks of incompetence yet again, and yet again we get ourselves into a poor position instead of actually solving the problem before it becomes critical, which it sounds like it has become critical. If the RFL are questioning your credibility, that's a damning statement, if ever I've heard one.
Well, that's one of the strange things here, isn't it? For years and years, the RFL's line on Bradford has pretty much been, they need to come out of a way to run it themselves. We're not going to tell them what they should and shouldn't do.
Yeah.
And this statement says the same thing. It's their decision to make. But I've never really heard them come out and say what they were doing was wrong before, which is what they've said in this statement. And
it's very clear, and yeah, and I think it's partly because obviously Chalmers has been poking them, hasn't he, in terms of poor quality deal in terms of value for money and that kind of stuff, and they've rightly responded to that, and their retort is, well, where's your fully costed up options in terms of, you're at Dewsbury for 2 years, that's great and everything, but what does that mean longer term? Because ultimately Bradford is a big city. As of the 1st of September, it will not have a presence in Super League, in Rugby League, definitely not in Super League, and what does that mean for the long-term credibility of the sport? The Bradford is part of that mix of the kind of brand that the RFL want around, no doubt, but only if it's run in the right way.
Saved Odsal for Bradford.
Yes.
The club can complain about the cost of the ground and those sorts of things, but without the RFL stepping in and buying the lease, we wouldn't have had rugby league at Odsal several years ago.
No, it would already be housing, but that's right next door.
And you kind of feel like the RFL did everything they could to help the Bulls out of this situation, and because the deal isn't preferential for the Bulls, it's the RFL that we're going to get criticised by Mr. Chalmers. So the RFL have kind of returned fire, like you suggest. There is a difficulty here, though, in that the RFL are deciding where they'll let them play, but the RFL are the people that would need to be paid for them to play it where everyone thinks they should play, which is Odsal. So the RFL kind of holds all the cards in a way, which is why Chalmers has tried to force their hand, hasn't he? He's tried to call their bluff and tried to move away to try and get some massively preferential deal, because let's face it, that's all he's out for. Either getting Odsal for free back from the RFL, or paying pittance to play there and being able to take all the money from it. But